The Mix 88.5 Property Update, brought to you by the award-winning Tudor Group, developers of Tudor Villas and in the final stages of Tudor Court Condominium, Pratham Nack Soi 2. The Tudor Group, Thai lifestyle, European standards.
Welcome to this week's Mix 88.5 Property Update here on PMTV, with my guest as always, Tim Gladwin from Salmons, Thailand, and brought to you by the Tudor Group.
The Mix 88.5 Property Update.
So, good afternoon once again and welcome to another edition of the Property Update here at Mix 88.5. Guest in the studio as always, Tim Gladwin from Salmons, Thailand. If you want to get hold of Tim with any of the things you hear within the Property Update, or get a hold of his knowledge on the property side of things, 0382525588 is the phone number for the office. Patia@salmonsthailand.com is the email address, and www.salmonsthailand.com is the website. So, good afternoon, Tim.
Afternoon, Russell.
So how are things? People are sort of going back to Bangkok a little bit. Some are coming down. It's sort of a cross now. As those go back, others come in. It's a weird situation, and it's still busy around town.
Yeah, it's undoubtedly still busy, although this past week, having gone into town a few times, it's been far more reasonable, the traffic levels. I've actually been able to move when going in and coming out, which has been not necessarily the case over the last few weeks. So I think there has been somewhat of a reduction in the people in town. Generally, the week has been a mixed one. Some very sad news from the Patia real estate business, in that Ronnie Fest, one of the directors of Matrix Iguana, sadly passed away on his holiday. A very, very surprising, shocking and upsetting turn of events for an awful lot of people, both with Matrix Iguana and around town, who've known Ronnie very well for a number of years. And like, I suppose whenever that happens, it's a little bit shocking, and all the more shocking when the person in question is someone you know and consider to be a friend. So, very, very bad news, and our condolences go out to his friends, family, and work colleagues at Matrix Iguana.
I think that on the good side of things, at least he did get to see the launch of both the Vision and Amazon, and had a little good end just before passing away. So sort of a little bit of good news.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he can be very proud of everything he's done and achieved, and his family, his friends, the same here in Patia. Matrix Iguana obviously has been a very big success story over the last, 6, 7, 8 years here, driven by Ronnie and Mickey, particularly in the latter stages, when Manny moved elsewhere. But he's been a really big player, very important player in the property market here for the last number of years, and he will be sorely missed by a lot of people.
Okay, and we'll no doubt get more information about what is going to happen with Matrix and those things, if there's going to be a service in town, the rest of it later on. So we're into high season now, and it's nice, it's sunny, it's blue skies, and the time of year that you like.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I mean, this is, for me anyway, the great attraction of Patia. It's a time of year that when it sets in, as it has done now, it's blue skies every day. I can't now think back to when it last rained, or when we had last some serious cloud cover. I'm not saying that it's months ago, but my memory is relatively limited these days.
But the older you get,
absolutely.
Just thought I'd say that instead of sticking it in there.
But it's classic Patia high season weather. It's beautiful. It hasn't quite cooled down to the extent that it generally does as yet, and that's when it really does suit me very well, when we get down to those sort of 25-degree centigrade temperatures, with virtually no humidity, a nice cooling breeze all day. Right now we've got the cooling breeze in the morning, cooling breeze in the evening, but during the day there's been one or two very hot days recently, which still a little bit too hot for perfection, but one certainly shouldn't complain when you have
I was going to say, it's a great place to be, even if it's that hot. It's a great place to be for vacation, so you can sit by the sea, or possibly sit in a bar looking over the sea and having a cold one while it is hot in the afternoon.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, as we've discussed on many occasions, one thing that does drive Pattaya and drive Pattaya's real estate market is the climate here. You know, even during the summer, we tend to have far better weather than much of the rest of Thailand. We don't tend to have that long, sustained rainy season that much of the rest of the country does. We do get a little bit of rain, but it's nowhere near as significant as even most of the other resort areas around Thailand. So Pattaya is anyway more of a year-round resort, but in particular the sort of 5 months from the start of November are typically as good a weather as you could find anywhere. I think if most people were asked to give their idea of perfect weather, they would probably say, well, clear blue skies, but a bit of a cooling breeze, maybe 25 degrees. Certainly that suits me down to the ground, and I think it does most other people. So we do get something approximating pretty much perfect weather for a large chunk of the year. And so when it does come round, and this time of the year, it's always a time that's able to put a smile on my face personally, and I think on the face of many other people.
And make the most of it. So at the moment then we need one giant size air conditioner on the outside so that we can sit on the beach and still be feeling chilled or cool.
Yes, it hasn't quite got down to the ideal temperature yet, but I'm sure it will be just around the corner.
So how is business? Are we still looking at trying to find places for people that are escaping the floods? Are we still looking to sell things? People still interested? Has high season really kicked in yet?
Yeah, I mean, we've had the odd inquiry from people escaping the floods in Bangkok, and that happens, but to a fraction of the extent that it was happening. So it's not a significant part of the business. We're not rushing around like fools, desperately trying to help everyone anymore. But nevertheless, in terms of more traditional, typical business, things continue to tick along quite nicely. You know, I wouldn't say it's as busy as it has been in the previous 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm excluding the Bangkok business there.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's still steady. There are still genuine buyers contacting us on a regular basis. We're still showing genuine prospects. We're still negotiating and working on genuine deals. So again, bearing in mind that we are at the very, very start of the high season, something, as we've discussed many times, which tends to grow. It doesn't suddenly become ridiculously busy overnight as of the 1st of November. You know, we're in that stage of the high season where it's gradually getting busier. I think obviously we've had a lot of cancellations, people who would have come to Thailand but for the floods and the news about the floods. But nevertheless, I think the numbers are starting to build again in town. Interest in real estate here is it's good. You know, it's stronger than I would anticipate. It's stronger than it's been at this time of the year in the last 2 to 3 years, so far as we're concerned anyway.
Well, that's always good.
So I think, you know, what you can take from it is, notwithstanding the fact that the floods have undoubtedly had an effect, still it's better than it was last year. One would anticipate that if it wasn't for the floods, it would be even better than it is.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a fair conclusion to draw. So, you know, all the signs, such as reading signs, is valid in this business. I think they're all positive.
Which is good. Now, I did hear a little article yesterday, I think it was, on the news while I was up in Bangkok, that tourism has dropped down and flights coming in and out of Suvarnabhumi dropped down over the last month, but they are now getting back to what it used to be, or what it should be at this time of the year. And it was buoyed by confidence, they said, this is a note, I think, from someone rather high up in the TAT, that said, overseas confidence was buoyed because Suvarnabhumi Airport is surrounded by a 3.5 metre high dike. Now, as far as I'm concerned, surely a dike should be 3.5 metres deep unless it's a rather large lady.
Yes.
But yeah, so.
Yeah, I think he means levy. But there we go. You know, that's... you know, it gives me confidence anyway.
Yes. Good. So more tourists coming into town and more tourists coming into the country. The numbers should be up and the flights back to normal fairly soon, as people did sort of shy away because of the floods. So business is normal. We're selling the normal stuff, or has it changed and you're looking into other things now?
No, as I reported last week, you know, when I said that there was more interest in houses over a certain value, we've seen a little bit more of that, but the demand that we've seen over the last week or so has been pretty general. It's been a mix, not one particular type of demand. just a general, relatively healthy, bearing in mind everything, state of the market.
Which is good. Any news from where we've sort of left off last week saying, well, the town is going to develop bigger and better. The town possibly could become the next capital of Thailand, possibly could become the place where all these new office blocks are going to build up, possibly could be the place where everyone's going to move out of the flooded areas and down to here to put their factories in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all it is at this stage, save for the government, the MPs from the government tabling the motion to look at the question of moving the capital city. Apart from that, it's all conjecture. But there has been plenty of it. I've continued to read a few news reports from around the world talking about this issue, talking about what might happen, how it might be dealt with, what they might do. I think that's what's happened as a result of the flooding. It's raised this issue. We all had heard of Bangkok sinking. We all knew that it was built on swampland. But until the flooding came, notwithstanding the fact that the flooding was from a completely different source than is potentially posing problems in the future, it's raised it as a red flag, and it's made people focus their minds on this issue going forward. So it's raised the topic as a subject of debate, and not just in Thailand. It seems to be a pretty wide debate that's going on. I even read in an English newspaper, they had some pictures, and they mentioned this as a big issue and one that had to be dealt with. So I think it has red flagged it, and it's something that needs to be addressed. One would anticipate that right now the focus is on getting Bangkok dry, getting the water that still exists up-country, getting it drained off as best as they possibly can, as quickly as they possibly can. But one would anticipate that now this has been raised as an issue, once the focus changes, i.e. once the water's gone, you would guess that this is going to become a major issue, because the chances are, I'm told, with the amount of water that they've had to siphon off and drain off, it means they're well behind in terms of schedule for next year. So normally it would have been very dry by now. The water levels would be starting to get lower. Right now, as it currently exists, water levels, there's still flood water up country, lots of it. So if the same rainy season comes again this year, even something not quite as bad as this year, presumably those levels are going to get very, very high again very, very quickly, and far more quickly than they ordinarily would, and one would anticipate that will then lead to a similar problem that we've had this year, even if we don't, like I say, get the same amount of heavy rains as fell this year. So I don't think anyone thinks that once the flood waters in Bangkok and Ayutthaya recede, that will be the end of it. I think what will happen then is the true debate will take place. What's going to happen now? How are we going to deal with this? What short-term plans are we going to put in place, and what long-term plans are we going to start working on?
Well, you would hope those are the things that are going to be discussed and issues that need to be addressed. I do remember many years ago, though, as you were in town in Bangkok, it was sort of a regular occurrence. Every time the rain did come down, parts of the town used to get flooded. Sukhumvit Road used to be a very bad place to wander around after it had rained heavily, because it was, a couple of feet deep in water. I know that hasn't happened for a long time, so maybe this is just a wake-up call and a reminder that, yes, it does and has done and still will do in the future what we're going to do.
Yeah, and I think there are two different types of flooding. One that's drainage related, i.e. the kind we get down here. It rains very hard. The drains, such as they are, can't cope with it, and therefore flooding occurs. However, when it stops raining and the drains are allowed to catch up, that flooding tends to dissipate quite quickly. The other type of flooding is when there's simply too much water, and an area that would normally be above the level of the rivers and the drainage canals, they go. The water comes up and breaks the banks, and it's a long-term issue
because it's got nowhere to go.
Absolutely, and I think that's the greater issue with Bangkok, and that's why it's not simply drained off when the water stopped. There's lots and lots of water that's got to pass down from up country and come down through Bangkok apparently and out into the sea eventually. But there's so much of it that the rivers and the klongs simply can't handle it.
Okay, how about business down in town then? We've seen over the last few weeks as we've been on several different launches of various different condominiums, all sorts of things coming up. Anything new in that department? We've got some new buildings coming in, or something else that we need to do. We're going to get some extra hotels in town. Why not? Let's build a few more.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with regards to hotels, a few years ago, it's always hard to remember exactly when, but I would guess going back 3, 4, 5, 6 years, we always used to deal with an awful lot of inquiries, serious, genuine inquiries from both hotel investors, hotel developers, hotel management companies. There was always an awful lot of interest in properties in Pattaya, because going back at that time, a high proportion of the properties in town were held by families. You know, they hadn't had this sort of corporatization of the properties.
Yeah.
There weren't many branded hotels in town at all. Not many franchise operations, not many management companies. It was, you know, like much of Pattaya, it grew up on the back of small family businesses. The big corporates didn't really come to town until relatively recently, and obviously we've seen with the Central Patna Group, they've gone in a big way recently. They've redeveloped the site in Wongamat to the Centara Grand Mirage. They've built the big shopping mall on Beach Road, and so there's been a lot more corporate investment here in recent years. And what we saw, like I say, all those years ago, was that there was a vast number of hotel properties on the market, and an awful lot of deals were done. A lot of properties were sold. In many cases, they were sold and then redeveloped, and you can see this around town with a lot of the hotels that are now there, fundamentally different in appearance and in quality to what they were perhaps 5, 7, 10 years ago. But then, obviously, the global credit crunch came, and followed on obviously by the sovereign debt crisis, and we saw a real drop-off in the interest in hotel properties here. In part, that was because an awful lot of them had been sold. If they hadn't been sold, some of the owners had decided that they would hang on to them after all, maybe redevelop them themselves in some cases. But that area of business, which had always been very busy, it suddenly became much quieter. And I think in large part because hotels are normally quite significant investments, and obviously there wasn't a lot of money around.
I was going to say, because the financial crisis is okay for you buying a couple of $1 million house, but if you want a couple of $100 million house, there's not so many of them, or people with that sort of money to throw around.
That's right, and of course the banks are not so keen to lend money for those sorts of properties when you've got an economic downturn happening. So the business, that kind of business, really did drop off, and I think that was both from foreign investors and domestic investors as well. But we've started to see a little bit of an interest growing again. Had a serious inquiry this week from a very aggressive potential investor, and we also had a new hotel listing this week. So I'm not sure whether it's simply coincidence or whether we're starting to see again that there is going to be movement in that area of the market. Certainly it wouldn't come as any great surprise. I think you look at Pattaya right now, we've had 3 or 4 of the toughest years imaginable for many, many reasons, and yet, as we discussed in recent weeks, tourist numbers have gone up very significantly into Thailand. More tourists are coming here. New tourist markets have been opened in terms of Chinese, Indians, and the potential that they offer is very significant. The numbers of tourists that are coming here from those countries are growing very, very quickly, such that I think China is now, by the end of this year, will be the single biggest supplier of tourists to Thailand. Never happened before. One would anticipate that it might never be beaten again, you know, unless India sort of take over, because those two countries have the potential for middle classes due to their economic growth, the like of which the rest of the world simply can't compete with. The fact that they're both so proximate to Thailand obviously means that this is a place that is likely to benefit very significantly from those growing middle classes.
Yeah, I did see something from an Indian company that were coming over here and doing corporate events, which normally you would see them going into Bangkok, but now they've decided that it's also much nicer, and they can still do the same sort of thing because they've got the right sort of hotels, they've got the right sort of facilities now, that they can actually bring their corporate events and corporate meetings into Pattaya instead of only concentrating in Bangkok.
Well, indeed. This goes back to the discussion that we've been having in recent weeks about the location of Suvarnabhumi Airport. In practical terms, it probably takes you, on average, a similar amount of time to get to a hotel in Bangkok, an average hotel in Bangkok, than it does to get to an average hotel in Pattaya. If you're jumping in a car or a taxi, obviously we don't have a high-speed rail link down here yet, although we're told repeatedly that will be coming in due course.
It's coming.
But most people jump in a car from the airport, and if you're in a taxi and you jump in the taxi at Suvarnabhumi, I would guess that the average time is about the same, whether you're going to Pattaya or to Bangkok.
Yeah.
Some hotels in Bangkok, given the nature of the traffic, could even take longer. I think it's probably the case that your average trip to Pattaya would be more predictable in terms of the range of time that it would take. A good journey might take an hour, a bad journey unlikely to take more than an hour and a half, whereas if you hit Bangkok at the wrong time, it could take you hours.
Still in those days, yes, where it could take you hours and hours to get into town, depending on what happened that day, whether it rained, whether someone changed their mind and put the directions for the traffic flow a different way. Whereas coming down here, I think it's always the same, unless you hit an accident.
Yeah, although even then, these days with the highways being, for most of the way, 4 lanes each side of the road, even an accident doesn't necessarily tie things up in the way that it used to.
No.
After Chonburi in the old days, you used to be on the Chonburi bypass, and obviously it was 2 lanes either side of the road, big lorries blocking up both lanes, and when there was an accident, the whole of the road basically closed.
Yeah.
Or in many cases closed, and the tailbacks would be absolutely awful. But now, obviously, you've got 4 lanes on each side plus a hard shoulder, and so the potential for that, the whole road getting clogged up is much reduced.
Yeah.
And I must say that I simply have never had any kind of delays or problems since the new roads were finished that I had, like I had before it was finished.
No, I must admit that in the olden days, coming down onto that particular situation, getting clogged up with the lorries and the like, I have had trips that have taken 5, 6, 7 hours to get either from Bangkok to here or from here back up into Bangkok, whereas now I've never had past 2 hours, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm the same, and I think you'd have to be very, very unlucky. I mean, obviously, I think when people started escaping the floods in Bangkok a few weeks ago, I'm told that the quantity of traffic was simply so great that it was pretty much gridlocked the whole way. But that's exceptional circumstances, not something you would normally expect to encounter, and I don't think you can really use that as an example of what's likely to happen. It's just a truly exceptional situation. But going the other way, certainly if I pop up to Bangkok to visit friends for a weekend or whatever, I might go up on a Friday evening, and even getting into Bangkok relatively late on a Friday, it can take me easily as long from pulling off the motorway at Rama 9 to get to Soi 11 Sukhumvit, where I generally stay. So that can take me more than an hour from that short different distance of a few kilometres, as it takes me to do the 140 kilometres before it. So, even obviously Sukhumvit is on this side of the centre of Bangkok. Even then, if you're going into the heart of Bangkok near the palace or even Silom area, I think it's going to take you even longer.
Done that many times, and find out that you can get from here to town, or at least the outskirts of town, the edge of the expressway, within a certain amount of time, an hour and a half, and then another hour and a half to get you the 200 yards around the corner.
Yeah, and obviously, while Bangkok is what it is, that's always going to have the potential for doing that. So when you're talking about people such as you were, the Indians coming down here planning conferences, it's actually easier because they can tell people to a very reasonably close extent exactly what the journey is going to be, when they're going to arrive. You're unlikely to get people caught up in traffic for several hours longer than expected.
So do we think there's still going to be lots more hotels coming up, getting the more 4 or 5 star classy hotels that are coming into town we've seen over the last couple of years? Think there's more of those to come?
Yeah, I think across the board, really. Like I said a minute ago, the reality is that through a very, very tough time economically, tourist numbers have increased significantly. Now, if that happens during a tough time economically, one would anticipate that when we do finally get the turnaround in the global economy, which it might take a while, but it will inevitably come, I think, tourist numbers are going to grow still further. You know, if they're growing during the bad times, you'd expect them to grow quickly during the good times. And Pattaya has ever more to offer. It just, like it or hate it, the fact of the matter is that Pattaya does appeal to a very wide, disparate group of people from all around the world. And they're all contributing tourists here. Like I said, the fact that we've got the two most populous countries in the world, equidistant and close, with middle classes that are growing quickly and providing ever more visitors, tourists who will presumably at some stage, in some cases, become residents as well, means that I think the only fair conclusion to draw is that numbers are going to keep continuing for the foreseeable future. And that means that developments such as hotel developments, condo developments, they make sense.
Yeah.
You can identify very easily and very clearly where the future demand is going to come from. And so why wouldn't you develop more if you had the opportunity to do so?
Just a little thought on those lines. We do actually have sort of a little Russian area. Do you think there will become a time where we would have a little China and a little India, as they do in like Singapore or Hong Kong or other places? Do you think that will come to Pattaya as well?
Yeah, I really do. It's just the way the human beings are. We tend to group together. Already we've got, and for many years we've had sort of a Middle Eastern area in Pattaya. You just have to walk down there with all the pipes, whatever they're called, going, and the Middle Eastern food, which is actually really good.
Do you like it every now and again? Yep.
There's undoubtedly a Middle Eastern area. I'm sure there will be an area that builds up into more of a Chinese area. As we've said previously, a lot of the Chinese that come here right now, they come in tour groups, and they're very closely controlled, so they basically get taken to where they go. As those tourists grow in confidence and in experience, more of them will become independent travellers, I'm sure, just as the Russians did, just as the Brits did, and everyone before them. And then they will start to venture out more on their own and get entertainment, bars, and so forth that targets them, as, like I said, with the Middle East area. Those open-air bars just off the start of Pratam Nak Road there, down going towards Walking Street, where it's just like a big Middle Eastern disco at night. I sometimes walk past it, incredibly loud, Arab music, Arab food. These areas will continue to develop.
And a taxi home.
Absolutely.
If only that were the case, getting a taxi in this town, but it would be quite easy. It's Mix 88.5. It's our property update. Tim Gladwin, our guest in the studio, as always, from Salmons, Thailand. And it's all brought to you by Tudor Group, the developers of Tudor Villas, and in the last stages of the Tudor Court condominium on Pratam Nak Soi 2. I believe they're getting into the final stages of decoration now, with the scaffolding all the way down and all those extra bits and pieces in situ. So let's have a quick look at the exchange rates this week. I think it's probably down to the baht not being so strong that changes this week. The pound has gone up to 48.8, which is up 0.3 from last week. The US dollar up to 31.26, which is up again from last week's 30.7. And even the euro, the lowly old euro that may be destined for the dustbin, is also gone up 42.12 this week from 41.40 last week. So I'm guessing that is going to be a weaker baht rather than anything else.
Yeah, although the Aussie dollar, which seems to be impossible to predict, has actually fallen in value a little bit. So
that's up and down like a tart straw, so I don't actually know what's going on with the Aussie dollar, and maybe we'll get someone Australian one day and say, look, tell us, mate, what's going on with your currency?
Yeah, I mean, common sense would dictate that we know that a lot of the factories making products for export, hard disks is one that's been in the news a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of them been closed down, supply is reduced, so presumably the value of exports going out of Thailand is much reduced because of the flooding, and therefore obviously the demand for baht will fall, which will likely, or should, in the absence of foreign exchange speculators, it should make the foreign currencies worth more.
So that's a good thing for if someone's coming over on holiday or coming out to buy something. Your $2 million condo this week at Tudor Court is going to cost you in US dollars $63,969. If you're going to buy it in sterling, it's 40,954, basically 41 grand. And the euro, if people are still bothering to use it, 47,485 gets you your $2 million condo at Tudor Court this week, which again is still not very much when you look at what you would get back in, let's say, the UK for 40 grand. You're still in a sort of garden shed area.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can buy anything realistically, property-wise, in the UK for £40,000.
Well, maybe if you went to one of those home marts or home buyers or one of those, and then you could get sort of a do-it-yourself extension to the house you haven't quite bought, but you might have some change at your 40 grand.
Yeah, you could get a caravan, I'm sure.
A caravan, there we go. Maybe that's something we should look into in the future for patio. Caravan park, yes. I know a few people that should live there now. Right, our property of the week then, let's get into that. What have we got this week?
Yeah, well, I thought I'd go back to the hotel I mentioned earlier, because it strikes me as being a great business opportunity for someone, obviously with a few quid in the pocket.
Yep.
It's not necessarily a cheap option, but hotels do offer a very good business down here. Cheap staff costs, limited number of regulations compared to the West, which means that they're very cheap to run over here compared to running them in foreign countries, and that tends to mean that the returns you get from running a hotel here are far higher than in most developed countries.
Because there are some hotels that are on that, on the good level, can still demand the same sort of money that you would expect to pay somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, I don't think the rates differ massively for similar styles of hotels, whether they're in Thailand or in a developed country. It's just the cost of running is far, far higher in the West. Obviously, that means that the profit margins available here are far greater than they are in most Western countries, and that's certainly what most hotel operators and developers have said to me in the past. This place, I can't obviously mention it by name because there's a certain discretion involved.
Yep.
It has roughly 120 rooms. It's in a great spot on a main road, but still only a very short distance, perhaps 200 metres to the beach. It's on 3 chennotes. Well, one of those chennotes is actually vacant land at the moment. The hotel itself and the swimming pool is on one chenote of around about 3 ngan, that's 300 square wa or 1,200 square metres. There's a restaurant, car park area on about 1.5 rai. And that's, I guess, 2,400 square metres.
Yeah.
And then the vacant lot is again about 3 ngan. 1,200 square metres. You can buy, therefore, 3 options. If you buy the vacant land and the hotels and the swimming pool, then you'd obviously have to make your own new car park on the vacant land and so forth. That's all available for only 155 million baht, which is little more than $1 million baht a room, which in hotel terms for a good location is great value for money.
Yeah.
And it gives an opportunity for someone to really do very, very well. If you buy the big piece of land with the restaurant, the car park on, and the hotel, you're looking at 200 million baht for that. All 3, 225 million baht. Really exceptional value for money. The rooms could do with a little bit of modernisation if you want to up the room rates that you get. That's obviously not a problem for a lot of people looking to invest. But even as it is, right now it's operating at 90% occupancy, getting good room rates from tour operators around the world, and doing very well. I think the average occupancy around throughout the whole year is between 60 and 70%. So it's a very good business. The current owner is getting too old, wants to move on, and is therefore pricing it very, very sensibly.
And quite happy, I suppose, to put 200+ million in your pocket for your retirement. Sounds good to me.
Me too.
All right, that's it for another week. Tim, as always, thanks very much for coming in, joining us.
Thank you.
If you want to know more with Tim, his office number is 038-252-588. We'll be back same time, same place next week for another edition of the Property Update here at Mix 88.5, brought to you by the Tudor Group. You've been watching the Mix 88.5 Property Update here on PMTV, brought to you by the Tudor Group, developers of Tudor Villas and in the final stages of Tudor Court Condominium on Pratam Nak Soi 2. We'll see you same time, same place next week.
The Mix 88.5 Property Update, brought to you by the award-winning Tudor Group, developers of Tudor Villas and in the final stages of Tudor Court Condominium, Pratham Nack Soi 2. The Tudor Group, Thai lifestyle, European standards.